Welcome back, everyone, to the Awful Takes podcast. It's review time, baby.
Woo!
My most anticipated movie of the year came out, and I've seen it twice.
Nice.
And probably going to see it maybe, one or two more times.
I thought you had seen it like 10 times already.
I was going to see it a third time, but I wasn't able to make the showing, unfortunately. But here we are. This is a movie that's been anticipated by me for a while. James Gunn's Superman 2025, the start of this new DC universe, and kind of the jumping on point, hopefully, for a lot of new DC fans. DC has been in such a weird spot over the past 10 years, and really just kind of not made me ashamed to be a DC fan, but made me just kind of feel disappointed, because I love these characters and I know they have so much potential as far as stories and as far as, emotionally driven narratives, and just to see that not being utilized. And it kind of became just like a joke. Like DC literally became a joke over the past 10 years.
And then the whole dark, gritty tone with like Zack Snyder and everything, I feel like just left such a bad taste in my mouth for a long time.
And
that
Marvel was just succeeding at all aspects. And I know DC can do the same, and if not more so. And just seeing that over the past 10 years, just the mistreatment of these characters really just hurt me a lot as a DC fan. Mm-hmm. So I was going into this movie with very different expectations. This is not a usual type of release, that's going to kind of go into my scoring and everything. This movie has a lot going into it. It has a lot packed into it. It had a lot of expectations. Did it meet them? No. I mean, I had super high expectations, but granted, this is one movie, and, hopefully the next 30 movies, however many they do, we'll see. So obviously it's not going to meet everything right out the gate, but I feel like this movie did such a good job in refocusing DC, which again, going into it, that's what this film was set out to do. We were erasing the past 10 years. We're not continuing that. We're going to start fresh. We're going to recast. We're going to have, new actors, new director, a whole new shift in tone. And I think this movie really worked in that aspect. So Wallied, I've been hyping up Superman. You've seen it. I guess you could kind of go over your expectations, but, watching it in the theater, did you have a good time? Did you enjoy it?
I had an absolute blast with this film. It felt so nice to be like excited for this film, especially hearing James Gunn was involved, because I loved his Guardians of the Galaxy films, and his Suicide Squad film he did was really good. Yeah. And so hearing he was going to be involved with Superman, I just was like, I'm all in for it. Like, I'm sold. Yeah. And so watching it, I just had the absolute time of my life. I had the biggest smile on my face. It kept me on the edge of my seat. There's even some moments where I honestly was tearing up at times, and it felt like something was missing for so long in like not only DC, but just superhero films in general. And I felt like all that magic just came back for me with this film. Yeah.
Again, my expectations going into this movie. So growing up, I had many iterations of Superman, like this isn't my first time seeing this character, I had grown up watching, obviously, the Christopher Reeve Superman when I was really young, watching the Smallville TV show with Tom Welling as Clark Kent and Superman, watching Superman Returns, which was a continuation of Christopher Reeve Superman. I had Superman the Animated Series, which I really enjoyed, and, obviously went on to Justice League Unlimited. Then in 2013, you had Man of Steel, which I really liked. So we had been through the rope a couple of times, at least for someone like me, So going into this movie with how it starts and everything, for me, it just worked. Just throw us into it right away. We don't need to see
a backstory or
need to
origin.
See the explosion of Krypton again. I don't need to see how Superman gets the suit again. I don't need to see I'm really glad that this movie trusted the audience to, we've seen that, do I need to go over this again? Not really. Like I feel like for the people who have downsides to this movie, they cite that a lot. They're like, well, I don't really understand the setup, the narrative. And it's just like, I guarantee if this movie had that would be seen as a downside.
It'd be a detriment to the film.
People would be like, well, they're showing the origin again. Why are they doing this? And it's just, I'm really glad how this movie started. I love the text at the beginning, just going over where we are in the DC universe. How long has Superman been around? How long metahumans have been around? What are we, what's the expectation of how this world is? It's very brief. And before you know it, Superman hits the ground and we're just thrown into it,
Yeah, I was surprised that was the intro. I actually thought that was going to be maybe like the midpoint of the film. So I was so surprised. That was like the intro sequence of the film.
Yeah.
And it's such a fantastic intro sequence and everything. I was shocked with like the robots and everything too, with like the Fortress of Solitude. It looks really awesome and everything. And also the 4 robot was Alan Tudyk, for you guys who don't know. He's a very famous voice actor. He's done a ton of really awesome voice acting. So it was really great to like hear his voice. I had like the biggest smile on my face hearing his voice.
I loved it. And I think this is something that maybe younger people might appreciate too. Obviously we have kids nowadays kind of exposed to that quick kind of storytelling, like now in a lot of how many animes do they just drop you right into the, what's going on? They don't set up characters. They just kind of trust the audience of like, you kind of have to move along with it, which is, I'm not going to lie, that's kind of a risky step, in introducing this universe. I was expecting us to see kind of the setup again. I was like, you know what? As much as I don't want to see the origin of Superman again, I'm like, I guarantee they're going to show it, or if not, at least mention it, this and this. But this movie doesn't really focus on that at all. There's a few brief mentions, obviously,
with his
parents, and he says Krypton was exploded and it's gone now. But that's out of a couple of lines, they didn't really feel the need to do that again.
Yeah, and that was shocking too. I was kind of shocked how like established everything was in the film. Like, it's like Superman's been around for a while, especially the relationship he has with Lois Lane. I was a little worried going into it if they were going to be like just introducing it again, but I love that they're just already just kind of like a thing. They're already like a couple and everything. And that was easily for me, like just one of my favorite parts about the film is just seeing their chemistry together, and just seeing their relationship is just so beautiful and so nice. And I love that like they just work together throughout the film, because that was one of my issues with Man of Steel, is like I didn't feel like you had all that much of a relationship with Superman and Lois Lane. So I'm glad it's like super fixed and everything here, and I'm glad they made that like a big core thing to like the film.
Yeah. Really love the whole scene of them kind of, you see Superman and Clark Kent's kind of character kind of being exposed. You have Lois Lane, who is very smart. She knows how to frame her questions, and she does this interview with Superman, and they kind of have this dialogue exchange that goes on for kind of a while, which I wasn't expecting. And you really kind of see the breakdown of how Clark Kent works in this world, how he views stuff. That's something that I felt was touched on in Man of Steel, but just kind of forgotten about in the sequels and everything.
Right.
That Superman really values humanity. Like he sees the value of human life, and he holds it even above his own life. That's something that he cherishes. Love the line a little bit later on, but Lois kind of says to him, you just have this kind of innate trusting ability with people. You think people are beautiful, And I love how he kind of responds. He's like, well, maybe that's the most punk rock thing. Because that in essence is Superman. He stands out from other heroes, from everyone else, because he just, has this loving ability for human life, you know, and that's something that his parents, his Earth parents, instilled in him, you know. They showed him the best of humanity growing up, and that's why he does what he does, you know. But man, that dialogue exchange between Lois and Superman, some people might say, like, you know, politics, they kind of force politics in this movie, but Superman has always been comics in general have always been political. They've always had that side to them. In the 80s, Superman, what did he do? He rounded up all the nuclear weapons in the world. You know, Superman 4 is called A Quest for Peace. Who does he fight in there? Nuclear Man. You know, like politics have always been in Superman, in comics in general, you know, and I just feel like people get so caught up on that, like they're forcing it into this movie,
but it's always been there.
It's always been there. Like The Dark Knight Returns literally is just like it shows the corrupt side of politics, the police force, things like that. And
same with Nolan's Batman films too.
Exactly. So I don't know. I get baffled by that complaint, but I really liked that they showed that side of Superman doesn't see the world in that way. Yeah. You know, as much as people try to force that opinion on him and really try to turn what he does into a narrative or whatever, he doesn't see that. He's stopping people from dying.
Yeah, that's it's very simple about. For him. And I was so surprised that it showed like his like more simplistic idea of like saving people and everything, and him going to like the country to like, you know, save like the citizens and everything like that from dying. But you see with like Lois's questions, it's like it's a lot more complex than you realize. And I love like when they show in that like scene where they're interviewing is that like, the situation is like a lot more complex than like Superman is even realizing. And that was something that I was so shocked like the film was showing, you know, and it was a nice like way to kind of like juxtapose that with like Superman's beliefs and everything.
And I think that shows humanity's side of maybe making things more complicated than they need to be. You know, we have this whole political system. We have this whole territorial aspect of humanity, and we tend to overcomplicate things to such a crazy degree that someone who doesn't see those, you know, sides of what people force on each other doesn't see humanity as that. You know, they think of this in a different way, you know, and it's really great to show that. Like, again, I love Man of Steel, but one of the things that I feel the movie and that universe did maybe just a little too much is just made Clark Kent, Superman, just be that kind of, he's an alien, you know, but that's not the character of Superman. Superman is human. and as much as you want to treat him as this kind of godlike figure, like he's raised as a human. That's such a big part of who he is. And why he does what he does is he feels he's human, you know. And in the storylines, like I love it when Superman hinders himself because he grew up human. He doesn't think he's capable of what he's capable of, and that hinders his power. You know, like he puts these kind of mental blocks in his own head because he really does believe that he's human, and he has to kind of unlearn that stuff to reach his potential. You know, and in Man of Steel and the Zack Snyder universe, like he's just this god and everything, and they just do that storyline of what if he's evil or whatever, and I'm just like,
I hate it.
I can't stand that.
It's so bad.
And this movie shows a bunch of different aspects of what would someone with this power, what would they go through?
Yeah, and it shows him too, like he's also just a very flawed character, even though he's like a superhuman and he's considered like a godlike figure. Like his relationship with Lois is a bit rocky, and his work life at like the Daily Planet is like, you know, it's not his best work and everything, you know. And then obviously with like him being Superman and everything, everybody kind of sees him as like, oh, he's this alien and he needs to go back home and everything. And it's like, the way the film shows it, I just was like so surprised by it. And even like when he's saving people throughout the film, it's like he tries his hardest to like prevent as much like damage to the city too as much as possible. And that just also just shows you like his character and everything. And whereas like the polar opposite with like Guy Gardner and everything, where he's just destroying everything around him and not really caring about like anything all that much. Really enjoyed.
There's great humor in this movie.
Lots of great humor.
Some people really kind of attribute humor now to like the Marvel, universe or whatever, quippy things like that. I feel like this movie found the right balance. Sometimes it has more emotional sides. Sometimes it has more sides that are meant to be, intimidating, scary. I feel like this movie, compared to something like maybe Guardians 2, where there was a lot of humor, a lot of quips, a lot of joking, this movie found that right balance of it has funny moments, but they don't break outside of that too much. Like for instance, that scene with Lois and Clark doing this whole interview, there's some humor in it, but at no point does it feel like they sidetracked it and the humor takes
or they have to
spotlight.
shove in jokes.
Yeah,
right.
Exactly. Because it always ties back to, no, Lois wants to interview him,
And I was shocked how like he was just like, yeah, go ahead, of course.
Yeah. Again, the movie finds that right balance. There's really funny jokes in here. There's
everything with crypto was really funny, honestly.
Yeah,
especially when they go to like that pocket dimension and everything.
Yeah,
I really loved the jokes, especially with like Lex Luthor's ex-girlfriend.
That was hilarious. When they're saving this, or Superman's trying to, they're saving this kaiju thing that like is huge. There's great humor in this scene. Some of it is kind of more funny humor, like Guy Gardner putting like the oven mitts on this thing. It's hilarious. But then there's like just kind of subtle humor too. Like Mr. Terrific meets up with Superman and is like, Superman's like, yeah, I was trying to find a way to get it out of here, maybe to like an intergalactic zoo or whatever, because he's trying to save this life.
Exactly, yeah.
And then you just cuts to Mr. Terrific and he's just like giving him like this side eye kind of look. And like, it's really funny. And that's not just like over the top humor. It's really kind of just like subtle.
More subtle. Yeah. Something you pick up on in more like a second or third viewing.
But man, this movie has a lot of those humor moments that really land for me. Never at any point did I feel like, oh, they felt the need to throw a joke in here and here it is, it's just distracting or whatever.
Yeah. I think for me, what was the funniest part about this film was the whole subplot with Jimmy Olsen and like Lex Luthor's girlfriend. I was not expecting him to take it as far as they did. I was like, oh, they'll probably just do like one scene of it, but I really loved that running gag a lot. It was really funny. And it was like
really funny.
And it was like a even more like funnier way of like when they find out like all the revealing information about Lex Luthor in the second half. I thought that was so funny where she's just like taking selfies of herself and it's all just in the background. I just thought that I was laughing super hard at that.
Really great moments. I love the kind of interplay between Superman and the rest of the Justice Gang. They really have a certain way of going about things. Superman obviously is a hero as well, and he does a lot of the same things to help people, but the Justice Gang doesn't really view, because they're human, you know?
They're a little bit more like reckless compared to Superman.
Exactly. And they Superman always tries to find like the best in everything and really values life.
Which is what Superman is and should be.
That part where he rescues the squirrel, I love that. That was so
like
funny.
Such a subtle, it's like such a little thing, but again, it just shows you how like caring of a person and how empathetic he is to like every living thing. Even in like the alien, like you were mentioning, he tries to like save him and put him in like a intergalactic zoo and everything. Like that's like, it's not even something you'd think of like Superman doing.
Exactly. This movie has a lot of it kind of jumps into it right away, has a lot of over the top stuff. It's not afraid of what, Christopher Nolan was afraid of 10, 20 years ago, of being comic book, being a comic book movie, we were very kind of scared of that in the 2000s of
Daredevil.
We can't have costumes. Let's put the X-Men in black leather. You know, let's you know what? Super villains, things like that don't really work in Batman's realistic take. Let's not do those. You know, let's have realistic villains like Joker, Two-Face. You know, let's stay away from the kind of crazier villains like a Poison Ivy or Mr. Freeze. This movie isn't afraid of that stuff. You see Superman in a pocket dimension universe with a proton flowing river, and he's saving a alien baby while fighting these guys.
Element guy.
And Crypto's trying to save him. A super dog is trying to save him. And you see monkeys typing up online chatter to hinder Superman's online image, you know?
To like troll, basically.
Exactly.
That was awesome.
And this movie's not afraid of that. Like, again, that was it's so prevalent in the comics, you know. Superman literally holds a book with infinite pages. He lifts infinity, you know, in the comics. And I feel like in this world, that could eventually probably happen.
I love that it's not afraid to take Superman and the whole lore and story like far. I'm glad it takes it really far. And let's see how much we can show in this first film. And especially in the universe, it's crazy how much things are just established, even though this is like the first movie in this like new Gunn DC universe and everything, you know. That whole sequence too, where they're in the Pocket universe, was just really awesome. And I was not expecting to get emotional with that like Element guy and everything and his baby. But it was just like a really like nice, touching moment. And it was just like, it's actually kind of shows you he's not as like bad of like a person as you would expect him to be.
Yeah.
And then especially when they go through like that river and everything and Crypto's there, I love like just how colorful it is too. And that's one thing I think also this movie does really well. It's just, it is so colorful. I love how much like the colors just pop out, you know, like especially dealing with like 10 years of DC films where they're all just gray and like washed out and everything. It's just so nice to like watch like a DC film where it's just like everything is super colorful, everything is bright. You could actually see what's going on.
Yeah.
You know, it's something I never want to take for granted ever again with a DC film.
I love, people might say it contrasts maybe a little bit too much, but you have the over the top stuff, Pocket universes, Crypto, Lex Luthor's performance. You have all this over the top stuff. But then you have a very grounded, very human side to it with Clark Kent's parents, John and Martha. Like when they go to the farm that Clark was raised at, it really slows down. And I'm really glad with the actors they chose for these two performances. They feel like real people, you know?
They feel like real parents.
Yeah. And it shows like, it just shows where Clark is from, you know, like it couldn't have happened anywhere else. It was meant to happen where it happened. This is where Clark learns of what humanity can be. You know, here he is, he's this alien, yet they treat him like a real son. You know, this is something that they wanted throughout their whole life, and they weren't going to waste this opportunity. And that's where Superman gains his love from, you know. And every time they have a couple scenes in the movie, but every time they're shown, I just love it. Like it just feels like you're seeing the other side to this crazy world that Superman is in and everything.
Yeah. With Metropolis and everything like that. It's a nice contrast between that.
And it works really well. Like I'm glad that James Gunn realized like we're gonna stray from the realism a lot in this movie, but we're still gonna have that side to it. You know?
We're still gonna show it in bits and pieces, which I really appreciate. I guess the only thing for me is I just wish it was a little longer, because honestly, that talk that Jonathan Kent gives to Clark is so heartwarming, and I literally started tearing up when he started like telling him, giving him like all this great advice and everything. Like it is just such a like a nice, beautiful moment that I wish was just a tad bit like longer.
Yeah, it was really good. And I feel like they could have expanded on it a little bit more. But man, I just love that this movie has all those aspects into it, you know.
And it still goes by like really fast too also.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't waste any time like, you know, dragging anything out at any point. Everything just feels like, you know, it's just like it's all killer mostly and no filler, which I really appreciate.
And I'm glad that we see again, like this is something that I don't think people realize. Like, yes, this movie has the campiness of superheroes, things like that, but that's kind of that. It's something you really have to balance right to find that right amount of campiness, but also how do you make it effective?
Heartfelt and
we can do just campy and you get something like a Batman and Robin and Joel Schumacher's world, but that doesn't feel effective. You know, that movie is really campy and over the top and silly. And I'm not saying that, oh, that's a misunderstood masterpiece now. No, because it's not effective. You know, this movie has the emotions and it has that campy side and it finds that medium.
Yeah.
You know?
It reminds me a lot of like Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy, because Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy was also really great with doing that also, of like being able to blend really campy, silly stuff. But there was also a lot of moments where it was grounded and there was a lot of great drama and between Peter and MJ and things like that. So it reminds me kind of a little bit of, it's really reminiscent of that for me personally.
Another upside to this movie for me, James Gunn has said that maybe sometimes people might try to find his selection of music maybe a little bit as a crutch that he uses throughout his movies. I think he's one of the few directors who just does it really, really well.
Oh, yeah, easily.
In this movie, they chose to kind of go into the more traditional kind of scoring. We hear the motifs from John Williams' original Superman score, and it works really well in this movie. But I will say, with the very small selections and songs that he does put in, he kills it again.
That Mr. Terrific sequence.
Oh my God. That
one of the
Noah
coolest
and the whales. Again, like he knows how to do that. He knows when the right song is selected. And like, that's just something that, man, like I just applaud him for it so much. It works so well. It doesn't feel jarring. From the moment the scene starts, you hear the song on the radio. I already knew what was going to happen. I was like, great, this is what I love. I love it when he does this. He finds that song that literally no one knows and he throws it into the pop culture relevance and is like, nope, here it is. Here's this unknown banger that you have never heard of. And you're going to love this song.
And he just takes it another level.
And you're going to love this character. And man, he's like, that's just so cool. Like, I love it when directors do that. Again, some directors do it really well, some don't. But man, that's just something that I just have an appreciation for. Is just like, this is something that he loves so much, yet he's able to do it in such a good way that people are going to love it too.
Yeah. And that's one thing too. Like the score in this film is incredible.
Yeah.
I forgot how great like a superhero score could be. I love all the themes they give for all the characters throughout. It feels... It was just like really nice to hear, and it gave you like a distinction of like which characters were on screen and like kind of what their vibe and feel was like. You know, that's something that I feel like a lot of superhero films don't really utilize as much. So I was really happy to hear the Superman themes and the different motifs of when some characters popped up throughout. That was like really, really awesome.
Yeah, it works so well. That's one thing that I don't know. I think people sometimes think too on the nose, and it's just they don't get it, you know, like with James Gunn in general. Like for instance, with his Guardians 3 soundtrack,
it's great.
No one knew the last song was going to be Dog Days Are Over. Like no one knew that. No one could have guessed that. Yet he's the only one who saw that vision in his head and made it work as well as it did.
Yeah.
That was something when this movie was coming out that I saw, is just people trying to jump ahead and be like, oh man, I guarantee he's going to put Starman in there with David Bowie. And that's just like the typical thing. I was just like, I don't think he will. I think he has his own selection of music that he's just going to surprise us. And he does it with the Noah and the Whales song. He does it with that punk rocker song in the credits. That
was awesome.
It's just, he's not gonna play that normal fiddle that people really think, you know. He's just so creatively unique that it's gonna be something we're not thinking of. I already knew. I was like, he's not gonna put Starman in there. Like, as much as people were trying to get ahead and be like, guarantee that's gonna be in there, he's gonna find a way to work it in. I'm like, I think he's a lot smarter than that. I think he's gonna find a few songs that really work well for the scenes and that they're in, and really show what we're watching on screen and really aid to that, you know? And I love that. I love that it was two songs that no one thought of.
Yeah,
no one
would have guessed never even heard of those songs. And it was
exactly.
And that's what's so great with James Gunn's music choices. Like, there's songs I have heard of, but there are also like some songs where like I've never even heard of them, and they give me like a great little introduction to like a new band or artist I never could have even thought of. And that's something I love so much with James Gunn and his music choices. Like, you can tell like he really cares about music and film, you know? Like, I feel like he uses music to like his utmost advantage. Like, even the music in the scene, like during the farm, like that was such a beautiful like piano little sequence and everything. I was like, man, do the emotions hit even harder than they would without music.
It works so well. I will get into my negatives with the film. This movie for me wasn't perfect. I hold it to maybe a different standard than most people. And I think James Gunn knew that while making this. I think he knew, all right, we've seen Superman's origin story. We've seen all this stuff. You know, I'm going to skip over that. And I think in skipping over that, there were some things that maybe were left out that I could have used maybe a little bit more of. Lex Luthor, as much as I love Nicholas Hoult and his performance and everything, he does such a great job in this movie. I could have used a little bit more. I could have used maybe a little bit more motivation. Obviously, we know Lex Luthor. Come on, he's Superman's biggest enemy. We know he hates Superman, this and this. But in this universe, I would have liked maybe a little bit more of Lex's side. I would have liked to see more of why he hates Superman. You know, they touch on it a bit towards the end in a couple lines, you know, with that whole line about Galileo and everything and all this mistreatment of people. And here comes this guy who earns the people's trust and people love him, and he didn't even do anything to earn it, you know. But I could have used just a little bit more, you know. When we were seeing Lex Luthor in this movie, he hates Superman, but I just needed something more driving him, you know. I needed something besides this is Lex Luthor and he hates Superman, you know. But maybe that's just me. I've worked for a lot of people, but I would have liked to have seen that, especially with all the recent or all the past iterations of Lex Luthor. That's something that I feel like we're missing out on, you know. That's something that can really change that villain into being what I know this villain can be, is just super intimidating, super, you know, methodical and smart. I guess maybe something that I was kind of hoping more of is that Superman the animated series Lex Luthor, someone who's really calm, really collected, really methodical with how he approaches Superman. And you see this guy who quite literally is the smartest human on Earth. You know, I feel like we didn't really get that with this iteration. Hopefully it's something we touch on later in the DC universe.
I feel like it's something they'll probably do more of. For me, it worked personally. I kind of like that they just kept it more simple. Like, he's just really jealous and, you know, he just really hates Superman. He's very just evil and greedy. I like that they just really kept his motivations pretty simple, at least just for this first film. And then maybe when we do get maybe more DC films or maybe sequels or anything like that, they can maybe be a little bit more complex with it.
Yeah, I think maybe it just reminded me a little bit too much of High Evolutionary and Guardians 3, just kind of that over the top, angry, yelling thing. Like, it works, and Nicholas Hoult, again, he does a great job. But it just feels a little too surface level. You know, it feels like we could have touched on something a little bit more, especially with what they're doing with Lois and Clark. I'm like, man, that's great stuff. I love that. But with the villain, I was like, man, I just wanted just a little bit more, you know? But maybe that runs into my next criticism of the movie. Like Wallied said, this movie it's very quick. It goes by very fast. I would have maybe liked, honestly, maybe another 10, 15 minutes fleshing out some of these scenes, you know, maybe adding some new dimensions to characters. But for once in my life, this movie felt maybe a little bit too short, you know.
Which is crazy because it's like 2 hours and everything. But yeah, no, I'm the same. I do wish there was a little bit. I wish the stuff with the Clark's parents was a little longer.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe. I wish there was maybe at least 1 or 2 more scenes before the climax with Lois and Superman, just because, again, that chemistry was fantastic. And I loved every scene they were in together. They really do make the film like even better.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do wish there was like a little bit more of like an expansion with the romance, especially because it did play such a big part in like the first half.
I would have very much liked a more prevalent side of Clark Kent, you know, like he's in this. And obviously we see, but most of the movie is, you know, the Superman side. But I really like that side of Clark Kent. You see how he interacts with humanity, and the image he kind of puts on is, you know, that view of humanity that he has, you know. He's in this movie, but it's very brief, you know.
Yeah, I was surprised how small it was. I honestly thought it was going to be a bit bigger, honestly. Yeah,
you see him in the beginning. Obviously, he goes into the Daily Planet. Yeah. And you see his interaction with Lois in the interview. But other than that, that's kind of it. You don't really get a lot of that Clark Kent side of Superman. And that's such, for me, a great part of the character is when you see the balance of both. You know?
And I wonder if it's maybe something they'll focus more on in like the sequel or something, is maybe showcasing Clark's side more.
Yeah, which I would just love, man. That would just be great. But overall, those were my few complaints with the movie. Maybe could have used a little bit more motivation for Lex. Also wish the pacing, you know, add maybe 10, 15 minutes, draw out some of these scenes, you know, and then showing that other side of Clark Kent, you know, that's such a pivotal part of Superman's character that I really could have used more of, especially because in some of the other movies, again, we don't get that side. I feel like that's just something that people are afraid of with Superman, is just doing that Clark Kent side. But that's something that I love so much, especially with the Christopher Reeves and Superman, the animated series, is they show that side. They show Clark Kent, you know, they're not afraid of showing that human side, I guess, you know. But yeah, those are just a few complaints. Other than that, man, this movie really hit all the marks I was hoping it was going to hit. This movie really serviced me as a fan of the character over the past, 25 years. Wasn't afraid to just jump right into it. Really didn't waste any time. Trusted its audience to be like, you know what? We've seen this before. We don't need to do this again. We don't need to go through the origin. We don't need to, man, that was such a smart decision,
Easily.
I feel like had they shown that, man, that would be people's biggest criticisms. I already know it. I would hear about it. People would be like, they did the origin again, man, I can already picture it. I can picture it now. Yeah. But this movie was smart enough to not do that. And again, this movie had the biggest challenge. You had 10 years of DC films that had just not done anything, and they just failed and failed. And this movie had to not only reset that, but also introduce a character that some people might consider a little dated. You know?
It's kind of hard to adapt also. Yeah.
Some people consider this character, not as relevant as some of the other comic book characters that we see now. And again, that's kind of the message of the whole movie is kindness is kind of outdated in our new world that we live in. And I love that this movie showed that, that Superman, he is this kind, loving person in a world that doesn't really view that as the greatest thing ever, but inspires people to hopefully do the same, that no, this actually is humanity's greatest thing. I love that speech that he gives to Lex Luthor at the end.
It was funny how Lex responded too.
I know. Yeah. But yeah, that's the movie in an essence, is he thinks that is humanity's greatest side. So yeah, I'm super excited to see more from this DC universe. I'm gonna go watch this movie multiple times if I can. Score wise, I'm probably somewhere between 8.5 to 9. Nice. Really enjoyed this movie. Thank you so much, James Gunn, for coming in and giving the love and attention that I know these characters are worth and that they deserve. I'm super excited to see whatever else they have planned. Obviously, Supergirl comes out next year and just got a little cameo in the movie.
Cameo. I was going to say, that cameo was really awesome. I was like, it just came out of like left field. I really loved that.
So good. And man, this movie really just did so much for me. And I'm not ashamed to be a DC fan anymore. I'll stand very proudly with the DC fandom. 'Cause, man, over the past couple of years, was it just rough?
Oh, God. Don't even get me started on that.
And it was like at the beginning of this whole Zack Snyder DC universe, at least we had some stuff. We had the animated DC movies that were coming out. We had the Batman video games. But man, everything else has just been crumbling. Now the animated movies aren't as good. And now the video games, they did that awful Suicide Squad game. And I was just like, I was in a very sad place as a DC fan of like, what do I have now? And now here I have it. Superman is here and I have it. And man, is it great, But yeah, probably going to see it multiple times.
Heck yeah. Yeah, this is easily the best DC film I've seen in probably like 10 years or so. Well, aside from James Gunn's Suicide Squad film and that first Shazam film, I do like that film.
I like that one too, actually.
But that's it though. But yeah, man, it feels so nice to be like happy about a DC film again. It feels just everything I love about superhero films just put into one. Just some of the best chemistry from Superman and Lois. I love Lex Luthor as a villain. Nicholas Hoult kills it as always. He's always been such a fantastic actor. And it's so great to see him getting all this recognition. And odd coincidence too, because he also played Beast in X-Men also. And nice. Mr. Terrific played the fish guy in X-Men First Class, which is that. Odd coincidence to see two X-Men actors in this, but it's
very true.
Awesome. But yeah, some really awesome action sequences. The flying sequences were great too. Loved how colorful it was. I love how fast it goes by. I will say my only little detriment is I just do wish there was a couple more scenes with Lois and Superman and with, of course, Clark and his parents, because those were some of the more emotional moments for me in the film. But yeah, this is easily my favorite superhero film I've seen since Across the Spider-Verse. And I'm so excited to see what James Gunn does with this universe. And then hearing him saying that like he's going to bring in other filmmakers to make some of these superhero films too is also like really exciting, and seeing what they're going to offer too is also great. I'm also pretty excited now for that Supergirl film. I'm very like curious to see what that's going to be like. But yeah, score wise for me, I would say I'm at like a 9.5 out of 10, honestly.
Nice.
I'm really excited to watch this again. I can't wait to see this again. I can't wait to just see what they do with Superman in the future, honestly, because if this is just the first film, I can't even imagine what they're going to be doing with him in the next sequels or whatever they put Superman in for any story, honestly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say for me, I'm at a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah. Well, there it is, guys. Our review. I'm pretty sure movie sales are non-existent at this point because everyone was waiting for our review. Now you have it. So
please
now
go watch it.
You can go and see it. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, I guess that's one thing I'll kind of end on is I am very biased when it comes to this character and everything. It's my favorite superhero.
Nice.
And I hope people realize that when I'm talking about this, like, I am biased, but also, I do have criticisms. I have, things that I maybe would have liked better or whatever.
Yeah.
So keep that in mind. Like, it's something that, yes, I was super anticipated for. It was something that I just really wanted. And there's our review for it, So if you go and see it, let us know what you think. I know some people agree, some people don't agree. But it is nice. It's nice to feel, hopeful again.
Yeah. And this film just gave me so much hope, not only for life, but just for DC and everything in general, which I know sounds kind of cheesy, but it really did for me personally.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll hopefully have more DC stuff to talk about within the next year. Supergirl's already coming out next year.
I know, so quickly too. It's only like next year. So we'll see how that turns out.
Let's see how it goes. But man, it's great. It's really awesome. All right. That's it for us. We will see you on the next one.
Good day and good night, mates.